Hey there, everyone. It's Kyrix here, and we're about to do one of those rants I do every now and then. Sorry about the cough. This time we're talking Star Wars. Now, what spawned this is The Last Jedi came out this month. I don't feel like narrowing it down much more than that. And I saw it exactly a week ago, actually. and anyone who knows me knows that when it comes to these third gen Star Wars, I have been avoiding everything about them like the plague until I actually see the movie. So now that that's happened, I'm starting to, oh, okay, I can watch this now. They're talking about Last Jedi. I can watch this now. And I'm sorry about all the coughing. What I'm noticing more than anything else is people are bitching about the movie, which I expected, honestly. If they were to release the original three Star Wars movies in theaters completely the way they were in the 70s, people would still bitch. I know this for a fact. Because here's the first secret about Star Wars. No one hates Star Wars like a Star Wars fan. No one. It's just, there is so much self-hatred and loathing about the thing they claim to love that I just can't even fucking fathom it. Like, if you go on a Star Wars mud, don't bring up anything. Don't bring up anything Star Wars because someone will find a way to piss all over it. I hate using the word, but it is the single most toxic fandom I've ever seen, much less been a part of. So when people ask me if I'm a Star Wars fan, my answer is no, I like Star Wars. That's what that means. No, that's not what it means. When you're a Star Wars fan, you have to hate Star Wars. I mean, in the Star Trek, Star Wars, clash, the Star Wars fan hates both of them. To the point where the other guy's like, dude, calm down. It's not that bad, really. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a lot of the things I've heard about Last Jedi and try and clear some of it up. And I'm also going to backtrack through all of the other stuff as well. Now, here's the thing. There are people, and I know some of these people, who think Star Wars is a movie series. And these people are wrong, because it's not. Star Wars is a series that has movies. It is not a movie series. It is a franchise that spans so many different forms of media. And a lot of these people, not all of them, I've seen a couple that have demonstrated otherwise, but a lot of these people, I'd say half to three-quarters of them, have only seen the movies. And thus, they really don't know shit about Star Wars. Because, I'm sorry, you don't. Because there's shit in the movies. Even if you only read... If the only books you read are the books of the movies, you still know more than these people who just know the movies, because there is a whole other world of Star Wars buried under the surface of just the movies. I found this out from the card game. There was a card game back in, let's say, the late 90s, by Decipher, just called Star Wars Collectible Card Game. I think that's what it was called anyway. Star Wars CCG from here on out. And they had cards of all sorts of things. Like, they had cards of the fucking people in the cantina. And I would pick up, because I got a lot of these cards just for free. And I'd pick up one, I'm like, this is that Hammerhead thing from the cantina. Oh, he has a name. Why does he have a name? He never had a name in the movie. And then there's a little blurb at the top that's like the backstory of, oh, this is what this is. There's stuff like, oh, Han Solo has a Blastech DLH-22? Something like that. Blastech's not my thing. I'm more of a Mersone guy myself. But it's like I think it's a DLH-22. It's either that or a DH-22. But yeah, you wouldn't know that if you only saw the movies. But it's come up other places, And I saw what originally brought this up is I saw a guy do a video. Seems like a nice guy. I didn't really have a problem with him. And his video was basically entitled The Last Jedi Destroys the Mythos. And I'm like, oh, this I've got to see, because apparently we watched two different movies. And I basically wrote up a sheet, more or less tearing apart all of his points. Not all of them. There were a couple where I'm like, yeah, this was stupid. Or, yeah, you're right here. Or, yeah, this would have been better. But, yeah. Now, let's preface this. Like I said, I've seen episode 8 once. I saw it day before my birthday, as a matter of fact. And I liked it. Doesn't make my top 3. Probably doesn't make my top 5. But that's okay. There, there are Star Wars movies that I don't particularly care for, but if they come on, I'll still watch them. You know? Because I like Star Wars. And, yeah, this movie actually ranks pretty low for me. For various reasons. And the movie has its flaws. Oh boy, does it have flaws. I'm sitting there in the theater like, yeah, that's dumb. I'll stay right... spoilers abound for all of the movies, including Rogue One. I'm going to go through all 8 of the main franchise. I'm going to dip into Rogue One. I'm going to dip into Rebels, dip into Clone Wars, dip into the books. So if you haven't seen any of this shit, and you don't want to be spoiled, leave now. Because I'm a talk. So yeah, for one thing, episode 8, that whole side story of Finn and Rose going to that casino planet could have been skipped. It really didn't do much of anything. They could have just as easily met him in a spaceport, and the whole thing could have taken 5 minutes. That was a garbage whole thing, just garbage start to finish. The only really worthwhile thing of it was that drunken patron who kept putting coins into BB-8. That was cute. And then BB-8 using those coins as projectiles later. That's about it. But let's start with some of the elephants in the room here. The hyperspace thing. That is the biggest thing. And I've actually gone over this in This Week in Kyrix, but I'm going to go over it again, because this is the big thing. They're like, oh, why don't you just, go to hyperspace with one of your transports? Because they did that once in Rogue One. On accident. Watch Rogue One again. If you have that question, watch Rogue One and watch what happens when a smaller ship plows into a bigger ship in hyperspace. Double hyperspace even, because Vader's ship came out of hyperspace as these were going to hyperspace, and they splatted like bugs on the windshield. I honestly doubt that anyone on Vader's ship was even killed from that. Maybe injured, but not killed. They did less damage than Han leaning out the window shooting his blaster at it would have done. Or at least that's the way it seemed. To do that hyperspace trick, you need ships of equivalent mass to do anything even approaching damage. I will say that them actually chopping into Snoke's ship was bullshit. But, you know what? Star Wars has always played fast and loose with how physics work. So we'll let it slide for now. But, watch those movies again and see how many ships the Rebels have that are even close to the size of an Imperial Star Destroyer. And you're going to come out with 2. And both of them were made by the Mon Calamari. So you're not going to plow into a Star Destroyer and do much more than scuff the paint. I mean, and forget X-Wings. I've seen people, why don't they launch an X-Wing? The same reason that running into a fly on the interstate doesn't destroy your car, but running into a deer does. Because the fly is nothing, I mean, from a Star Wars standpoint, it doesn't even get through your deflector shields. And the shields of a Star Destroyer are so powerful, I'm willing to bet that under most circumstances, a starfighter wouldn't do shit. Look at the Executor from Return of the Jedi. The A-Wing did, in fact, destroy their bridge, but keep in mind that was during a battle. I'm willing to bet someone took pot shots at that ship at some point. Actually, let me backtrack here, because I made a fuck up. The shields wouldn't do shit to them, because generally the shields are only good for energy weapons. So things like a proton torpedo, which you never really see them use in the movies, outside of that scene, would do a lot more. That's why in Star Trek it's the same thing. Torpedoes don't really care about shields, So yeah, the A-Wing plows through, but if that A-Wing had shot them, nothing. Also, I don't like the design of the Resistance A-Wings. I don't like it at all. X-Wings I can kind of leave or take, but I do not... The A-Wings look too blocky for me. They're supposed to look sleeker and shit because they're newer. I would expect a Clone Wars era A-Wing, if they existed, to look like that. Kind of like how the Y-Wing looked. So yeah, the hyperspace thing, you would have to put a cruiser up against the fucking Star Destroyer. And I'm sorry, the Empire has more of them. Even if the Rebellion were to commit, and we're backtracking to Leia's era, I'm sorry, to the Rebellion era, to Vader's era, there we go. No, fuck it, Tarkin, no, Tarkin was, god damn it, I got no one to pull from. Okay, back during the era when Hoth was relevant, there we go, you know, movies 4, 5, and 6, I should have just said that. Back in that era, even if the Rebellion had brought their entire fleet of Mon Calamari cruisers up against the entire fleet of Star Destroyers, and they went, every Mon Cal took out 5 Star Destroyers, and none of them missed, and none of them fucked up, and everyone hit their target and took out 5, the Empire would still have more than enough ships to crush the Rebellion. And that's just the sad truth. Now, if you're asking how the Radis, which was the name of that ship, by the way, that's something you don't learn from watching the movies, how did the Radis take out the entire fleet? My guess is that it had just enough to basically cleave in half Snoke's vessel, and the shrapnel did the rest. That would be my guess. Or maybe there's some kind of hyperspace wake. I don't think there is, because ships wouldn't go into hyperspace in such tight formations if that was the case. But what do I know? Again, Star Wars, physics, they're not friends. They're barely on speaking terms. So yeah, I think what should have happened, at best, is that they should have plowed through one of the Star Destroyers, or maybe a couple of them, and the shrapnel should have wrapped up the other Star Destroyers and maybe taken out Snoke's gun, but otherwise left that ship intact. Because really, that thing didn't have the mass to do what it did to Snoke's ship. Because that looked like the same kind of cruiser that Home 1 was from Return of the Jedi, which, don't get me wrong, it's a big-ass ship. That thing, I almost said would be on par with a Super Star Destroyer, but no. It's the Rebel equivalent of the Super Star Destroyer. How about that? But yeah, I had numerous flaws with this movie. But people are like, oh, the humor sucks. I'm like, really? Because I, for one, laughed my ass off at Poe's line about on hold for General Hugs, is what he called him. And Hux launches in this whole speech about how he's going to crush the rebellion and they're all going to die. And then he's like, still holding. And then Hux just kind of, can he hear me? Just watching him deflate like that really helped. It was a lot of fun. Let's see, what other... Okay, Rose. I'm going to say right now, didn't like Rose. I'm not going to say it was an SJW thing, because Rose didn't really do anything as a chubby Asian girl that she couldn't have done as a fucking tall Spanish man, you know. Except, you know, kiss Finn. Well, she could have done that too, really. It might not have sold as well, but it would have been the first on-screen homosexual kiss Star Wars has ever had, so, I don't know. One trope for another, I guess. But I didn't care for her. She just didn't do it for me. To be fair, there's lots of characters I just don't like, and she's one of them. I don't have a particular reason. Well, actually, I do have a particular reason. A, she was part of that stupid casino run, and unlike Finn, she didn't have credit with me for the first movie. And her dumbass, I'm going to stop you from saving the day because I don't want you to die run. It's like, oh, I couldn't let you sacrifice yourself. Kiss, pass out. Guess it's okay if my friends die, though, because that's pretty much what that implied. Although, to be fair, in her defense, and I don't do this lightly, I doubt Finn could have stopped that thing by himself. If you're wondering what thing I'm talking about, watch the movie. I'm not explaining it. I don't care to. Let's actually go over my list here, because I addressed the points of that guy. The whole thing about the Knights of Ren was brought up, of shit that was forgotten between movies. And there was a lot of shit that fucked up between movies. But the question was asked, like, oh, who were the Knights of Ren? We never found out. Well, We didn't find out what a Sith was until episode 1, and you're thinking, well, yeah, they were introduced that way. No, they weren't. That's something that existed in the old Star Wars, because I remember that Decipher card game I mentioned? One of the cards was Darth Vader, and it refers to him as Dark Lord of the Sith. And I spent forever trying to figure out what the fuck a Sith was. We never found out. Well, we did find out, but we didn't find out until new movies were made. They asked who Snoke was, and my answer is, who was Supreme Leader Snoke? Supreme Leader Snoke was Supreme Leader Snoke. Just like when Emperor Palpatine was introduced in Episode 5, we didn't know who the fuck he was. We didn't really find that out until the prequels. You know, we didn't find out he was a Force user until the lightning scene. There were hints of it, of course. But yeah, and then another thing was, why would you unceremoniously kill off Admiral Akbar? Because that's what they do. Have you seen these movies? Fucking, go back to Revenge of the Sith. Saesee Tiin, Eth Koth, Aayla Secura, Kit Fisto, Plo Koon, Ki-Adi-Mundi. Those are all pretty big characters who had meaningless deaths. Those first three, the first two and Kit Fisto, if you don't know who those are the guys who went with Mace Windu to arrest Palpatine. Eth Koth went out before anyone else really knew what happened. Tin died seconds later. Kit Fisto had a bit of a showing and then he was killed. Aayla Secura was shot in the back and Swiss cheesed. Fucking Plo Koon, his squad mates dropped in behind him and shot him out of the sky. Ki-Adi-Mundi got caught between two armies. It's what they do. War sucks. Sometimes in war, bullshit happens. You know? Then why kill off Phasma unceremoniously? For one thing, we can't necessarily be sure that she's dead. She probably is, but she really should have died on Starkiller Base. She was in a trash compactor on a super Death Star that blew up, and yet here she is. Hell, it's entirely possible they've cloned her and kept her memories. That's a thing Star Wars has been known to do. But again, I'll direct you to the originals. They did the same shit to Boba Fett. You know? Apparently, to find out where Boba Fett's awesome, you have to watch the holiday special, which is why no one knows why he's awesome. Then they brought up, like, oh, what about this mystery of Rey? It turns out that Rey's parents were fucking nobodies. And that is one of the things that made me the happiest, because everyone had these theories. Oh, she's Kenobi's kid. Oh, she's a Skywalker child. Oh, she's Han and Leia's secret child. No, I'm sorry. That would have ruined the movie. Because not everything new has to come from something old. Making up new shit is what makes the movies better. You know? And the fact that she was a nobody actually fits in with how the Jedi work. Sometimes someone's just really fucking strong. Hell, this came from the novels, too. Luke had an apprentice when he started his academy, which happened after Thrawn, which you people who don't know the books don't know who the fuck I'm talking about, but at least you people who watch Rebels know who Thrawn is. Anyway, he started his own academy, and he went around using this. Well, he didn't use it, but he had other people use it. They had this Force scanner where people could find out who had the Force, and people think midichlorians were made up for Episode 1. They weren't. They didn't call them midichlorians, but the concept existed in the novels decades before Episode 1 made them a thing. But yeah, he went in and he found this one guy called Kip Duran. And Kip was so powerful. Like, Luke was basically like, wow, he's one of the most powerful beings I've ever come across. And he trained him, and he basically became the next Darth Vader for a little while. But he wasn't anyone special. He was just a guy. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure Luke didn't find him. As I recall, Han found him in the spice mines of Kessel, meaning he was just some fucking prisoner, and I think he was born there, but I don't remember. It's been a long time since I read the Jedi Academy trilogy, which really shouldn't be the case, because I own it somewhere in this house. But anyway, So yeah, the idea of an out-of-nowhere super powerful Force character is not, something this movie made up. We never found out. To the best of my knowledge, they could have introduced it in a later book that I never read. We never found out who Kip's parents were. Actually, I think we did, and they were just, nobodies, just like Rey's. They died in the spice mines with him. Actually, yeah, I think that's... Sorry, I'm putting piece and memories together as I'm talking. I think what happened where his parents did something the Empire didn't like. They arrested them and him and threw him in there. His parents died, and he managed to live because he had the Force. Let's see. A question that was asked is, how the hell did Maz get Luke's, or Anakin's, they said Luke's, but it's Anakin's old lightsaber. Probably the same way Palpatine did in the books, because in the books, specifically the Thrawn trilogy, there was this showdown on a planet called Wayland, which was Palpatine's personal vault where he kept all his really cool shit. And this insane clone of a Jedi called Jorus Sabaoth. I never did learn exactly how to say his name. Let's call him JC. Anyway, the clone of JC fancied himself the new emperor, and he was getting so powerful anyway, and apparently in the Old Republic he was one of the more powerful Jedi. Sadly, he never made the jump to canon, but quite frankly, he was an asshole. To put not too fine a point on him, imagine Count Dooku with a superiority complex. And you're probably thinking, well, Kyrix, he already had one. Yes, JC's was worse. JC was so far up his own ass that he probably didn't know what light looked like. But anyway, JC decided he had this Force vision that Luke would kneel before him. And Luke and Mara Jade, who at the time wasn't really a good guy, had shown up. And JC came out and said, yeah, I had a vision that Luke would kneel before me. One Luke or another, and out steps a clone that he made of Luke. He made the clone from Luke's severed hand and armed him with Anakin's lightsaber that were both recovered by Palpatine from Cloud City. Somehow. How, I don't know, because that shaft went straight down to the planet, which was a fucking gas giant, but apparently he got them. So, yeah, that was never explained either. So again, that's another thing that if you read the books, makes just as much sense. So, another answer to the hyperspace trick, backtracking to that. Why wouldn't they use that even if it wouldn't take out their whole fleet? Because if you watch Rebels and if you read the books, the Empire has these things called interdictor cruisers. And I'm sorry to sound sarcastic, but it's something I've known about for years, but it's something that's only been recently reintroduced to the canon. And they've been in the video games forever, but if you don't play them, you don't know. What an interdictor cruiser is it's a small Star Destroyer with these 4 big balls on it. And these balls are gravity generators. And when they flip a switch, nobody goes to hyperspace. That's a thing. The Empire's had it forever. Hell, technically, that technology is ancient if you go on the old canon, because they had one of those in Knights of the Old Republic, which took place 4,000 years before Yavin. So that's a thing. So here's the thing. If the Rebels, let's say they could get a Gallifrey transport, which is those little medium transports from Hoth. If they could get one of those to take out a Star Destroyer, and that's a thing they can do, then before long, every fleet's going to include an interdictor, if not make a new Imperial-class Star Destroyer with interdictor bubbles. And suddenly, there will be no hyperspace, there will be no getaways. So when the Empire shows up with their infinitely stronger ships, you're going to die. It's not that you might die, you will. Because you can't go to hyperspace and torpedo them, and you can't go to hyperspace to get away. So you're kind of fucked. So even if this was a thing the Rebels knew they could do, I promise you they wouldn't. For that reason, because interdictor cruisers exist, and right now it's not necessarily cost effective to have a whole lot of them out there. But when your opponent's sole tactic is, go to hyperspace, torpedo boom, they'll start becoming a lot more cost effective. Let's see, what else? Oh, how do you drop bombs in space? Who the fuck knows? That was a question that was asked with the bombers. But it's kind of a dumb question because bombers have existed forever. The Y-Wing was a bomber. The B-Wing was a heavy bomber. Or at least in all the video games it was. Matter of fact, I mentioned that the Resistance has new X-Wings and new A-Wings. Those bombers looked a hell of a lot like an upscaled B-Wing. With like 3 crew members. So, and as I recall, the B-Wing has 2 or 3 crew anyway. So the idea of a super B-Wing that just drops a fuckload of bombs isn't that far off. Let's see. I'm going through the list of points I addressed before. Oh, this is a stupid question. Why were the weapon manufacturers evil? Because they were fucking war profiteers, and those are evil. I'm sorry. The point remains, whether you're making weapons for the good guys, the bad guys, or both, you're making things that sole purpose is to kill people. It's not like once the war is over, you turn a fucking ballistic missile into a coffee table without disarming it first. And even then, that's a really weird table. It's going to be all round and your shit's going to slide off. But anyway, yeah, that's a really dumb thing to ask. I mean, that's like saying, well, why in Iron Man, why was Tony Stark so upset later on that he was a weapons manufacturer? Because he saw what those weapons did and he didn't like it. And now the guy had 3 plot fixes. And I agreed with 2 out of these 3. I'm gonna give him a shout out here. The first plot fix he had is, rather than Admiral Holdo, who only people who read the books would know, I didn't read that book, but TV Tropes did, and I read TV Tropes. But yeah, it's like, why not have Admiral Akbar pilot the Radis? And my answer is, yeah, that would have been awesome, especially because it's the Radis. Radis was the admiral, the Mon Calamari admiral from Rogue One, who went to help Jyn. He was the guy who, from square one, was like, yeah, let's go with Jin's plan. And the first excuse he had to actually go there, he did. And having one Mon Calamari pilot a Mon Calamari vessel named after another one would have been awesome. I'll grant that right away. His second plot fix, how about not keeping Poe in the dark? Yeah, that would have helped. If not Poe, at least clue someone in on what the plan had been. But this is the thing that pissed me off, was, you should have given Luke a hero send-off, and I'm like, they did. Luke didn't have to do shit. He'd abandoned his sister and his friends once already. He didn't have to do a goddamn thing. But you know what? He did. He, using the Force to project himself systems away, which is a lot of power. He basically projected an illusion of himself, a mind trick. Think of it as a Jedi mind trick to people you can't see. Hundreds of them, if not thousands of them, all at once without missing one of them, and maintaining it for several minutes, including people you personally knew. So yeah, he projected himself there, and he single-handedly held off the, quite frankly, killing squad long enough for his friends to get away, and then peacefully joined the Force, something only Yoda has done. Because if you look back, only 2 Jedi now, as of Episode 8, only 2 Jedi have ever not had a violent death, and they were Luke and Yoda. So that's the thing. You could make an argument for Kenobi, but he basically joined the Force when he died, and he was fighting when he died. Yeah, he had that moment of peace, but still. You could also make the excuse for Anakin. But, you know, he died from grievous injuries he just suffered on top of the injuries he had his whole life. So, that's the thing. No, Luke, to me, got the best death he could have possibly hoped for. He got a better death than he had any right to hope for. And I'm not saying Luke didn't deserve it, but the Jedi don't have a good history of dying well. Mace Windu, one of the greatest Jedi of his era, got his hand cut off by an ally and then flung out a window to his death. Obi-Wan Kenobi, basically killed by his own son. Ki-Adi-Mundi, trapped between his troops and the ones they were fighting and gunned down by both of them. Jedi don't die well. The fact that Luke and Yoda got that chance is amazing. Now let's backtrack a little bit with Star Wars. I keep mentioning the books, and I'm getting real arrogant about it because there's a whole fucking world of Star Wars beyond what the movies tell. And the funny thing is, people, and I'm going to go after the original trilogy people right now, because they have it in their head that the original trilogy was so much better than it was. Like, they see Anakin and they're like, Anakin's no Luke. I'm like, no, he's a lot more mature. Fun fact, watch the original trilogy again. Luke was a whiny bitch. Okay? He was. He spent the entire first movie bitching at everyone about everything and thinking he knew it all when he's a farm boy who'd never fucking left his world until that afternoon. That's a thing. Matter of fact, if you read the book, The Princess, the Scoundrel, and the Farm Boy, I think that was the order of it. Good book, by the way. There is a scene, because it's done in 3 chapters, or rather 3 sections. The first is Leia, which covers the start of the movie to her interrogation. Second is Han, which covers Mos Eisley to fleeing the Death Star, and the rest of it's Luke. One of the scenes in that book is Luke getting into the simulator to fly the X-Wing, to learn how to fly the X-Wing. And the lead up to that scene is just special. What happens is, there's this guy there called Wedge Antilles. You might have heard of him. But at the time, no one had. Or at least none of the main characters. Anyway, Wedge is lowering him into the simulator, and he's trying to point out, oh, this does this, this does this. And Luke's like, hey, I'm a good pilot. I know what I'm doing. And Wedge just kind of holds up his hands like, okay, man, you know what you're doing. Luke lasts all of 8 seconds, and he comes out of that simulator, the fucking cockpit opens, and he's in tears like, please don't kick me out! I want to fight the Empire! Please give me another chance! I promise I'll listen! Yeah, that's in the canon now. Because the new books are canon. Luke literally was in fucking tears because he was such an asshole and couldn't fucking listen to the guy trying to give him the tutorial. Which is really truth in television. Watch a Let's Player who doesn't read the instructions. It's hilarious. But, yeah, that's the thing. Empire, not much better. He stops bitching as much, but he's still impatient. And he decides, oh, I'm going to go confront Darth Vader, who is a Jedi killer. Even before he learned that he was Anakin Skywalker, one of the greatest swordsmen the Order had produced, he's still a Jedi killer who killed trained Jedi, including his master. Both their master, actually. Kenobi, It's like, oh, I know Vader's there, but I'm gonna go there with no fucking training. That's gonna end well. It's only gonna cost me an arm and a leg. Well, you lucked out. There was a sale and only cost you an arm, Luke. Hold on, gotta let the cat in. Come on in, Willow. I heard her battering herself against the door. The whole Han Solo thing. Han Solo's a badass. Maybe, but he also abandoned his friends. Read the books. Specifically, something that came out, it's not necessarily canon anymore, because Disney wiped the canon, but when the special editions were releasing, they released these little mini-books for kids. And there was one for Leia, one for Luke, one for Han. I owned the Han one, and my friend gave me the Luke one, and I never actually read it. But the Han Solo one takes place in Jabba's palace after he'd been let out of the carbonite. And this Ba'omar monk initiate, because he's not a brain in a jar yet, comes in and basically he got Jabba's permission to interview Han and get his life story, just, for the records. And Han talks about the events of the first two movies, including him leaving Luke to die. And in that, it is spelled out that Han did not want to go back and save Luke. Chewie made him do it. Chewie kept bitching at him and growling at him and being a passive-aggressive dick to him, deservedly so. And Han only went back because if he didn't, he'd never have any peace with Chewie, and since Chewie was bonded to him for the rest of his life, the only way he'd have any kind of peace is to kill his friend. He didn't say it in those words, but basically, Chewie would basically haunt him with this for the rest of his life if he didn't go back. And that's the only reason he went back. Because he liked the kid, he liked the princess, but not enough to risk his life. But he liked Chewie enough to risk his life. So yeah, Han's not this paragon of virtue. He's, quite frankly, a scoundrel. And it wasn't until around the third movie that he started growing out of that for real. Leia. Kind of a bitch. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's actually can be a very good thing when you're in a position of authority. But she's kind of a bitch. By the way, I want to point out something fun. Leia is very much Anakin's daughter, and Luke is very much Padme's son. They really took the traits of their opposite gendered parent. But they took the skill set of their same gendered parent. So that's just fun to me. It has no bearing on this conversation. 3PO. 3PO is the worst character in all of Star Wars, complete garbage, and never should have been put in. I'm sorry. I'm going to say that. I will continue to say that until someone proves me wrong. And given that 3PO hasn't done a goddamn thing, it's going to be real hard to prove me wrong. See, here's the thing. The thing that really pisses me off is 3PO could have been awesome. Like, if you remember Rogue One, you remember K2. Oh, K2 is awesome. Yeah, that's how 3PO was originally supposed to be. The sarcasm bit. He was supposed to be a kind of a greasy used car salesman. If you're wondering what that would look like, watch another Disney movie called Hercules. There's this character called Hades. That's what 3PO was originally supposed to be. And that would have made the trilogy infinitely better. I'm sorry. I don't care how much of a purist you are. Hades 3PO would have been better. Just would have. What's that thing? Oh, Darth Vader's a badass! No, he's not. His first big screen badass moment, first one, took place in Rogue One. At the very end. In a scene that they wanted to cut. Or someone wanted them to cut it, I don't remember, but it ended up making the screen. That's the first badass thing Black Armor Darth Vader has ever done on screen. Everything else came from the books and the video games. Period. What about all those rebels he shot down on the Death Star? Well, you mean the ones that were facing away from him couldn't maneuver and couldn't shoot back? I could make those shots. That trench isn't wide enough to do a whole lot of jukes and turns, especially when you got two men on your wing that you don't want to fly into the wall. If you're thinking, well, that's bullshit, there's an example of what happened when you try to dodge. When Han shot one of the starfighters that were flanking Vader, the other one tried to dodge, and it smashed him out of the trench. What about that fight with Luke? Oh, you mean the one where he beat a barely trained Padawan? Yeah, the greatest swordsman of the Order beating a youngling. Yeah, that's something you put in your fucking resume. And that's another thing. Luke didn't have training worth a damn. People have made the complaint, oh, why is Rey so powerful with no training? Why was Luke so powerful with no training? My best guess is he had a month of training. Because you don't know how long hyperspace really takes. And, actually, something occurred to me. I can check. I'm gonna... Based on how many consumables the Millennium Falcon had, actually, I want to look something up real quick here. The old Corellian light freighter here. Because as I recall, that thing had enough resources, really, to last for like 2 months, I think. Yeah, 2 months of consumables. So at best, Luke had 2 months of training with Yoda. Because anything beyond that, and they'd have run out of food. Because the Falcon couldn't go to hyperspace, they had to fly straight from Hoth to Bespin. So at best, Luke had 2 months of training with Yoda. And he could have had 2 months of training with Obi-Wan, but I'm willing to bet 3 days tops. I don't even think he had that much. Because the only training he got was aboard the Falcon going to Alderaan. So let's bet the over here. Let's say Luke had 4 months of Jedi training when he faced Vader. I don't think I need to tell anyone that Anakin had significantly more. Shit, even if you take out the fucking 16 years or something of training, I'm sorry, the 8 years of training, rather, that he had under Kenobi between episodes 1 and 2, just take the 3 years of combat experience from the Clone Wars, and he's got Luke beat. It's just... So, yeah, turns out most of that training isn't what you think it is. It's how to know what techniques work and how to be a Jedi. Because unless your opponent's trained, you don't need to know a whole lot to swing a lightsaber. But yeah, that's a lot of my problems with the prequels, is people have these things where there's certain shit that's just seeped into the popular culture from the other parts of the fandom. Like, the word Ewok was never mentioned in there, but we know what an Ewok is because they were on the toys. No, that's the thing. That's something you don't realize if you don't have it brought up to you, is how much shit you know that was never mentioned in the movies. You know, like, I don't think General Dodonna was ever called by name, but Star Wars fans know who he is. You know? Admiral Akbar might have been mentioned by name, but I don't remember. We know who the fuck Akbar is. So yeah, I have my issues with Episode 8. I really do. Like I said, it doesn't even... I don't think it makes my top 5 out of the 8 movies. Yeah, matter of fact, I guarantee it doesn't make my top 5. It's in the bottom 3. So... But that doesn't mean I don't like the movie. Episode 7. Oh, God. If you want to know what I think about Episode 7, watch my Let's Play of Star Wars The Force Awakens, or rather, Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens. Because no less than 6 times I launch into full-scale rants at how stupid it is that things turned out the way they did. That, oh, it's just the Rebels and the Empire again. Couldn't come up with a new threat. You know? Couldn't make a new alien force for them to go in. Couldn't have some other warlord from another part of the galaxy in. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, off the top of my head, some of the old separatist races could have come back. You know, some of them are warriors. Like, the Geonosians had warriors, but rebels established that they were pretty much exterminated. But hey, in 30 years' time, or however long that was, your race can make something of a comeback when your race is insects. You could have, if not used the Yuuzhan Vong, used something similar. You could have the fucking Hutts make a fleet, you know, since the Empire isn't there to keep them down anymore, and the Republic wasn't there to keep them down either. And, you know, they kind of have a grudge against Han and Leia. There's so much you could have done without recycling the Empire, or even use the Empire. The Imperial Remnant in like 30 years of old Star Wars canon was a huge threat. That's the thing you could have done. You could have had the Remnant, or even still called them the Empire. But somehow, between episode 6 and 7, nothing changed. Because the Resistance were still this ragtag group of rebels. And the defeated First Order were still on top. No. All of them no. And the fact that the blasters had so much more power, instead they're like, oh, this isn't the blaster, this is a fucking cannon. Boom! The fact that blasters made you bleed, that pissed me off. That's not a thing. Because, I'm sorry, just like lightsabers, superheated plasma cauterizes wounds. You're not going to have the kind of blood that stormtrooper managed to smear all over Finn's helmet. No, not a thing. And the stupidest thing to me, the biggest thing that killed my suspension of disbelief in episode 7, was the idea that Han Solo had been hanging with Chewie for anywhere from 20 to 40 years and never once fired that bowcaster. I'm sorry, that's not a thing. You don't get to be friends that long with someone without, playing with their stuff. Hell, he's used Luke's lightsaber. Granted, Luke was unconscious at the time, but he used it. Yeah, that's just a thing. And you could argue, oh, well, the bowcaster is a ceremonial weapon for the Wookiee, which I think it actually is. But Han was the subject of Chewie's life debt. There is literally nothing more important in Chewie's life than Han. And if Han Solo, the focus of his life debt, the man who rescued him, his best friend in the whole universe, wants to use his bowcaster, just, pop off a shot, you think Chewie's going to tell him no? Because I think you're delusional. So yeah, that's 7 and 8. I talked about the originals. Now let's talk prequels here. Now, I haven't made a secret of it. I love the prequels. But you know what? They got their problems. And let's talk about them. Episode 1. When Episode 1 came out, it was awesome. It was. Believe it or not, Episode 1 was fucking awesome. Everyone loved it. We were all talking about how cool Darth Maul was and that great lightsaber fight and how awesome the Duel of the Fates theme was. Which no one really contends that isn't awesome. But it felt really weird. Even when I saw it, I'm like, this feels a little off. But I always put it down to, oh, well, it's a whole new era of Star Wars. That's just how that era feels. Then Episode 2 came out, and Episode 1 still felt weird. Then Episode 3 came out, and it just confirmed the fact that, no, Episode 1's weird. And I can't really... It just looks weird. And it's not like CGI, it's just something about it seems off. To this day, Episode 1 feels off to me. And I get that people didn't like the whole politics thing. Personally, I kind of like that they took it in that direction. But then again, part of the reason I like the prequels is I come to Star Wars to see space wizards with laser swords. And the prequels had that in abundance. But yeah, the prequels, Phantom Menace, I'll admit, a lot of little Anakin's lines really fell flat. Jar Jar, while I found him entertaining, I could easily see how he could be annoying. I could definitely see how people would be upset at the supposed racist undertones of that. Like, oh, the Nemoidians are Japanese and the Gungans are Jamaican. Yeah. And there's one black man in the whole world. What's the point? I'm sorry, there are 3. Captain Panaka was black, and his replacement, whose name I can never remember, was also black. But, yeah, Episode 1 fell flat in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't hate it, but it's definitely not my top 5. So let's talk Episode 2. Episode 2 was in many ways a vast improvement and also so much worse. And the worst part is the Anakin Padme romance, because here's the deal. I was on board with the Anakin Padme thing back in episode 1. You don't need to tell me that Anakin's in love with Padme. I could see that as early as fucking what's his name? Little Annie. And yeah, you do need to put the fact that Padme's on the same page as him, but it didn't need to take up half of the time it did. Don't mind me, that sound you may be hearing is headache pills. I slept in, and if I do that for too long, I get a headache. And as you can guess, I did that for too long. So yeah, that is, I believe TV tropes refer to that as a romantic plot tumor. George Lucas doesn't know how to write a romance. That could have been done with a more competent writer in that field, but yeah. But I loved the mystery aspect of it. The whole thing of... Now, granted, the problem with mystery is once you've seen it once, it's gone forever. But the whole thing of Obi-Wan Kenobi trying to figure out where this dart came from, where this planet Kamino was, and who the hell ordered this clone army, that was kind of fun. You know? And then this whole thing with the Separatists forming their council, and then the Clone Wars launching, that was great. You know? And, yeah, that was just fantastic to me. So let's talk episode 3. I really don't have any issues with episode 3. Now, you could be saying, well, Kyrix, what about all the dumb decisions Anakin made? He did make some dumb decisions, but here's the thing. I read the books. Remember that. That's a big thing about me. I read the books. And the books explain everything. Every plot hole you think is in episode 3 is fleshed out fully in the books. Like, you get to see why Anakin did the shit he did. Why was Anakin so pissed about not being a master? It wasn't an ego thing, actually. I'm gonna bring that up right now. People see Anakin pissed about not being a master, and they think, oh, he just thinks he deserves to be a master. He could care less. He was actually very seriously considering leaving the Jedi Order at the time. Being named a master didn't mean anything to him because he didn't think he'd be there. He thought he'd leave. The reason he wanted to be a Jedi Master is because Jedi Masters have access to certain parts of the Hall of Records that others do not. And Jedi Council Masters, even more so. And he thought that he could find something in the more forbidden records that Knights and Padawans weren't allowed to see that could help him save Padme. So, if you're wondering why he got so pissy and threw a literal tantrum when the Jedi said, we will not grant you the rank of Master, it's because he didn't hear, we will not grant you the rank of Master. He heard, we're not going to give you the keys to the vault that could save Padme's life. She's going to die, and you got to live with that. That's what he heard. And when you consider his attachment issues, that makes perfect sense. Now, you could ask why he didn't confide in Kenobi, and there are reasons. He was very, as much as he loved Kenobi, and he did, and as much as he trusted Kenobi, and he did, he also knew that Kenobi was very much a Jedi, and that the odds were very, very good that Kenobi would have turned him in. And you know what? The odds were very, very good that Kenobi would have turned him in. Because that was actually covered in the books as well. Obi-Wan very much suspected there was shit going on between the two of them. He didn't think they were married, much less that he'd gotten her pregnant. But he did think they were dating. And you could see his thoughts, and he basically said something in his head along the lines of... Actually, this was covered in a different book, not the movie book. This was Jedi Trial. But yeah, this was covered in what at the time was canon. He basically, in his own internal monologue, said something along the lines of... And again, this is all to himself. Basically said something along the lines of, Anakin, don't confirm anything, because what I don't know, I can't report. That was basically his mindset. He's like, oh, I can suspect all I want that you two have a thing, but until it comes out in my face, I don't have to tell anyone shit, you know? So yeah, Anakin or Obi-Wan very much knew something was going on. He didn't understand the extent to it. That, by the way, is why he went to Padme to find Anakin. Because he knew that if he told anyone, he'd tell Padme. I don't think it was confirmed until after she died just how close their relationship really was to him. So, odds are pretty good that Obi-Wan would have turned him in. Now, I don't necessarily think they would have expelled him from the Order because, quite frankly, at that point, with a flat out known to exist Sith Lord loose, because that's the thing, they knew Sidious was loose. They knew about Sidious for a long time. Gunray, when he had been captured in Episode 1, actually spilled the beans in some of the older books that Sidious was a thing. And Tyrannus confirmed it. Or rather, he spilled the beans that Sidious existed. Not who he was, not where he was. Tyrannus, that is Dooku, confirmed that Sidious had his greedy little hands in the Republic. And that they knew that he was really high up in the Republic. That was actually a plot point in Episode 3 and in Labyrinth of Darkness, which took place... It was basically the prequel to Episode 3. It took place right before. When I say right before, I mean the last lines of Labyrinth of Evil is, "The Chancellor's been captured. We need you to come back to Coruscant now." So yeah, that's where Labyrinth of Evil ends, is them abducting Palpatine. The reason Palpatine was abducted is because the Jedi Order was so close to finding Sidious that he needed to throw them off the trail by causing a massive distraction. Basically, the Jedi had narrowed it down to Sidious being someone on Palpatine's staff. They didn't think it was Palpatine, but they were fully convinced that Palpatine was under Sidious's control. They were right, but not for the reasons they thought. And they also knew that Anakin was very much Palpatine's little pet. So there is no way they would have released him from the Order. Because here's what would have happened. Keep in mind, Anakin came to Coruscant as a child. Let's say 9 years old. Fuck it, let's bet the over. He came to the Order at the age of 10, right? Jedi don't have belongings, so he doesn't have any money. He has the robes on his back, the lightsaber on his belt, and maybe a couple of other knickknacks he's picked up along the way. And he has R2. Where's he going to go if you kick him out of the Order? Even if they give him some severance pay, because I don't know if that's a thing. But I'm pretty sure it isn't. Like, oh, here's 8,000 credits, make a life for yourself. What's the first thing Anakin's going to do? He's going to go to the only friend he has. He's going to go to Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, who is, from the Jedi's perspective, under the thrall of Darth Sidious. Don't you think Darth Sidious would love to get his hands on a powerful, disgruntled Jedi Knight? That's right, Willow. That's exactly what he would like. That was really cute. I don't know if the thing picked it up, but as soon as I asked that question, Willow's like, "Meow." Come on, Willow. So yeah, the Order wouldn't have cut him loose. They'd have punished him somehow. They'd have probably tried to break them up somehow. My honest interpretation is that they would have found a loophole to just let it happen because it wasn't worth turning the Chosen One against them. They wouldn't have liked it, and his relationship with the Council would have soured tremendously. But he might not have become Darth Vader. And as for why he trusted Palpatine the way he did, keep in mind he didn't. He really didn't. I mean, I'm sure some people misremember that, but when Palpatine told him, "I am a Dark Lord of the Sith," Anakin freaked the fuck out, left, and went straight to the Council and told Windu. That was That's exactly what he did. He's like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Now in the book, there's a lot more things where Palpatine tells him things like, really, because he talks about the Sith with Anakin a lot in the book. In the book, he basically says, well, who told you the Sith are evil? The Jedi. You know, the guys who don't like the Sith. Who's to say the Sith are any different from the Jedi, really? And he even says a line, I'm going to paraphrase because it's been a couple months since I read the book, but he says something along the lines of, Anakin, if this Darth Sidious were to walk into my office right now and give me the means to end this horrible war right now, I would kneel down on the ground, kiss his feet, and beg for his help. And Anakin was like, but he's a Sith. And Palpatine's answer was, I don't care if he's a Sith. If he can help us, I don't care. I don't give two shits about the Jedi's religious squabble with these Sith. If he could help us, I would take that help. You know, trying to plant the idea that the Sith aren't necessarily the super bad guys that they actually were. And Anakin didn't turn until that confrontation with Windu. Palpatine, I would say purposely, made himself so ferocious against Windu that Windu knew there was no fucking way in hell they could hold him. The only option was to execute him. And since Anakin wasn't there to see how deadly Palpatine was, he didn't necessarily know that. Like, all he saw were 3 dead Jedi. For all he knew, they stood there for 20 minutes and he cut them down one by one, and not in the span of 10 seconds. I think if Anakin, honestly, I think if Mace had brought Anakin with him as part of the arresting party, and he'd been either the 4th or 5th Jedi, I think that would have ended differently, because Anakin would have immediately seen how powerful and dangerous Darth Sidious was, and he would have thought, no, we can't hold him. We can beat him, but unless we cripple him or kill him, he's just going to get away. But yeah, Mace Windu went for the kill stroke, which I believe he was right in doing. And Anakin panicked, and he went to stop the blade and took off the hand, which I'm willing to bet was either muscle memory on his part or Palpatine moving the blade. I don't think Anakin purposely went for the hand. And then, of course, Palpatine launched him out the window, and Anakin's mindset was, I just killed the second in command of the Jedi Order. There is no forgiveness for this. Fuck it, I'm a Sith. You know, that really struck me as his mindset. And you know what? I think he was right. But for more things, the books also clarify that part of the reason Anakin was so willing to do what he did was because Mace Windu was doing the exact same shit that he'd been accused of the Jedi Order taking too much power, taking power into their own hands by assassinating the Supreme Chancellor. So yeah, if you watch the movies, there are more plot holes than there are if you read the books. Because the books don't have a 2.5 hour whatever runtime and can actually go into detail on this shit. And if you read just one book on the original 6 movies, read that one. Because to me, it has the best opening and closing of any of the books. Because, you know, here's the thing. I really am a sucker for the good guys winning. I'm a sucker for that inspirational shit. And there is inspirational shit all through that book. For as dark as it is, like, the opening, paraphrased, is basically, the age of heroes is coming to an end, but it saved its best for last. And the book opens with basically talking about how parents all over the galaxy are trying to comfort their children, like, oh, we know the Chancellor's, it's going to be okay, the Chancellor's kidnapped, but it's going to be okay, and the kids are like, yeah, it's going to be okay. Kenobi and Skywalker are coming. They're going to save everyone. And it basically talks about how the two of them are inseparable, you know. To the minds of everyone, they are the war. How the children know that because Kenobi and Skywalker are on the way, everything's going to be okay. And really, that's the thing. That's the reason why Palpatine had to separate the two because there really was nothing that you could throw at Kenobi and Skywalker that they couldn't beat. And if Kenobi had not been sent off-world the way he was, Anakin would not have turned, flat out. With Obi-Wan there, he would not have turned. And Palpatine knew that. That's why he dropped that little lure about Grievous. That had actually been part of the plan, was to get Kenobi out of the way. That's why he tried to have Anakin leave Kenobi behind, and why he told Dooku, first and foremost, kill Kenobi, because that's something in the books. He told him, kill Kenobi. Wound Anakin's pride, but Kenobi has to die or Anakin will not turn. Because that's the thing. Dooku knew the plan was to turn Anakin. He was in on that. What he wasn't in on was the fact that Anakin was to turn and Dooku was to die. Because I'll let you in. For those of you who didn't read the book, the plan, as told to Dooku, was that he was going to kill Kenobi, and then he was going to throw the fight to Anakin in a convincing way, and be taken into custody. And he would confess to his crimes and spend his time languishing in a cell until the Clone Wars ended. And then he would be redeemed and pardoned, and he would go back to his home on Sereno, which is where the Count came from. He was the Count of Sereno. And, live out his life. That was never the plan, but he didn't know that. He didn't know that until the last second. And I don't think this line made the movie, but his last words to Anakin were, beware the dark side. Because right when he had those sabers at his neck, he realized instantly what happened and that he fucked up. And he didn't have it in him to throw Palpatine under the bus. But that last little bit of good guy left in him was to warn Anakin, don't do what I did. For all the good that did. By the way, I would love, since they're doing all these prequels and shit like Rogue One and the Han Solo movie, I want a Count Dooku movie. I really do. Because we hear so much about how Dooku was this great Jedi, and really, from the sound of things, he was. He was an arrogant asshole of a Jedi. But apparently he was a really amazing Jedi, and I would have loved to have seen him before his fall, outside of glimpses in the books. I've heard that there's a Yoda movie. I've heard that they're making it, that they're not making it. I hope the Yoda movie, as much as it would be fun to see Yoda in his youth, I kind of hope the Yoda movie is about him and his apprentice Dooku. I would love that movie. Or that it's Yoda and the recently promoted Master Dooku and his apprentice Qui-Gon Jinn. Because Dooku's a pretty fascinating character. As a Sith Lord, he's not that great. He kind of falls to the bottom of that scale. I mean, to me, it's Palpatine, Maul, Vader, and Dooku. Why Maul above Vader? Because you get to see Maul do more cool shit. And we know too much about Vader, whereas Maul was kind of a blank slate. But we didn't get to see a whole lot of Darth Tyrannus. He didn't get as much. He got more in the Clone Wars, but most of his screen time was him kicking ass. And in the books, there's so much they talk about. Like, one of my favorite books from the Clone Wars era was Dark Rendezvous, which was all about the relationship between Dooku and Yoda. And that they had a relationship very much like the one between Obi-Wan and Anakin. I mean, to me, you could literally make 20 movies just about the Old Republic Jedi, and I would watch every fucking one of them, because that is the era that fascinates me. There's so many characters that could be explored. Like, I want to know about Dooku. I want to see little Mace Windu coming to the temple and becoming a Jedi Master. I want to see the shit that Kit Fisto did. I want to see more stuff about Plo Koon. I want to see Ki-Adi-Mundi, the Jedi Knight who sat on the council before Anakin. Because that's the thing. He wasn't a master until after Episode 1. So that whole line about, oh, this has never been done. No, it was done regularly. In the old canon, it was done frequently to give the masters on the council the perspective of a Jedi Knight who was actually out in the field. Ki-Adi-Mundi, by the way, little conehead guy, is unusual in the Jedi in that he has a wife and family. because the Syrians, his race, have a low birth rate, and they need every single one of the breeding population. So he was given special dispensation. That's another clue that I think the Jedi wouldn't have tossed Anakin out on his ass. They would have censored him, or censured him. They would have bitched the hell out of him, but I think they would have let him stay. And you know what? I think, from reading the books, it's not shown in the movie, but in the books it's somewhat mentioned. I think Yoda knew. Not suspected, knew. I think Yoda knew exactly what Anakin was coming to him for. And that was another thing they mentioned in the books, is the fact that Anakin did not like Yoda, and Yoda did not like Anakin. The two of them did not get along. They didn't hate each other, but they came about as close as two Jedi could come to hating each other. Because Yoda had been against Anakin from day one. I think the only Jedi that hated Anakin more, again, I'm using hate in quote marks, was Windu. Windu fucking hated Anakin. And that was actually one of the problems. Windu's distrust of Anakin is one of the things that sealed the deal. The fact that he said to Anakin the phrase, "You've earned my trust," implied that up until then he never had it. And think of this from Anakin's perspective. He's done everything the Order has ever asked of him. Except for the Padme thing. But that's literally the only thing Anakin never... If you send Anakin on a mission, it'll get done. He'll win. Often spectacularly. And yet that wasn't enough to get this master's trust. So... But then again, to be fair, Palpatine had brilliantly engineered the whole thing. And I realize this Star Wars rant has become, hey, Kyrix liked Revenge of the Sith. And I do. But again, this is talking about Star Wars, and I could do this all day. I could literally make a fucking weekly thing of me talking about Star Wars for an hour. But yeah, the thing is, when Anakin came to Yoda, the fact that Yoda saw him, Anakin didn't set an appointment. He just walked in while Yoda was meditating, and Yoda's like, "Oh, take a seat. What's wrong? I can feel something's wrong." And Yoda tried to give him the Jedi advice of just let it go. And everyone's like, oh, Yoda didn't know. I think Yoda knew. I think Yoda knew what was wrong with Anakin. Was that he was afraid for Padme. He might not have known they were married, but he knew what was bothering him. And this is going to piss off a lot of people, because since the prequels come out, people have come up with the whole the Jedi were wrong thing. And the Jedi did have some issues. But Yoda was right. As much as you might say otherwise, if Anakin had let go of his fear of losing Padme, she wouldn't have died. Yoda actually gave Anakin the right advice. You might say, oh, that's cold. It's really not. Because the whole Revenge of the Sith happened because Anakin could not let go. And he held on so tight that he literally strangled her. That's not even a metaphor. His hold on his attachment to Padme was so strong that he killed her to save her. If he had been willing to let go of his fear, he wouldn't have charged in to save Palpatine. Because that's why he left. Because while he was sitting there alone in the council chamber, he's thinking, if something happens, if Palpatine dies, my cure for Padme, my way to save Padme dies with him. That's why he left the chamber. And if he didn't care, he wouldn't have cut off Mace Windu's hand to save Palpatine. If he didn't cut off Mace Windu's hand, he wouldn't have been Darth Vader, and Order 66 wouldn't have been initiated. The Clone Wars would have actually went on a great deal longer, but Dooku was dead. Grievous was dead. If you think Gunray and his cronies were going to wage that war, you're wrong. Because they were kind of in that war under duress. They were in that war to make money. Really, all that the new Supreme Chancellor, let's say Valorum. Let's just say Valorum. He would not have been elected again, but he was the previous one. Let's say Valorum came back into power, or Padme even. All that really would have had to been done at that point is for them to offer a good money deal, and they'd have come around. Because the real separatist leadership weren't interested in separatism. They wanted to make money, and they were doing what Sidious told them to do. No Sidious, no orders. You know? So if Anakin had let her go and just accepted that things would go the way they would go, Episode 3 wouldn't have happened. Willow, quit jumping on my desk, baby. You have a drawer. Sit on your drawer. Sorry, she's in a mood. There you go. You can sit on that side of the desk. Good girl. So, yeah, Yoda gave cruel but accurate advice. So, let's jump to my issues with Episode 4. I really don't have as much other than I don't like how much of a little bitch Luke was. But let's actually address concerns that other people have, like, Obi-Wan assumed the name Ben Kenobi and no one noticed? Yeah, that was actually covered in the book Kenobi, which, that's another book. I don't know if it's canon right now, because it came out like right before Disney brought the axe down. So it could be canon, it might not be canon. It was like one of the last books before the canon purge. But Kenobi is very much an old Western, and it's really good. But in Kenobi, Kenobi goes by the name Ben. He just, I'm Ben, you know. And one of the, he settles down near this, let's call it a tavern. It's really a trading post. But one of the runners of this trading post, actually her daughter, takes a liking to him, as does she. They both do. The daughter, I think, follows him home one day and happens to overhear him talking to Qui-Gon, or trying to. Because this whole point is him trying to learn how to become one with the Force. So he talks to Qui-Gon a lot. And he overhears the name Kenobi, or she does. And so he comes in the next day and everyone's like, oh, Ben Kenobi, you know. Turns out, in the Star Wars universe, Kenobi is basically Smith. It's a very common last name. So the appearance of some guy named Kenobi, not that big a deal. Plus, Tatooine was a backwater. That's the whole reason the Order never found Anakin as a child. Well, as a baby. So the idea that Vader wouldn't know about a Ben Kenobi is pretty realistic, actually. Plus, why would he ever go back to Tatooine willingly? He hates that world. He hates that world as much, if not more, than he hates himself. So the idea that Ben Kenobi could slip under the radar is pretty realistic. And if you're thinking, well, Palpatine might know, he might, but he doesn't care. And again, I'm going to jump back to old canon. In Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, I think that was what it was called. That deals with the aftermath of Episode 3, like within a month of Episode 3. Which has this really great scene where Vader keeps bitching and moping, and Palpatine is thinking something along the lines of, if he doesn't quit bitching, I'm going to kill him myself. I'll find a new apprentice. I can't put up with this bitching for the rest of his life. But Palpatine flat out tells Vader, I could give two shits about the surviving Jedi. Because Vader's all about, we gotta hunt down those Jedi. And Palpatine's like, I don't care. They're beaten. They don't matter anymore. They will never again have the power they once did. They're not a threat to us. And he lets Vader hunt the Jedi because it shuts him up. And at the very end, Vader finally catches the last couple Jedi that had been hunting. And as he's killing him, after he kills him, he realizes the Emperor was right. They don't matter. And they establish the Inquisitors to hunt him down, but it's no longer Vader and Palpatine's real concern to hunt them down anymore. So Palpatine, the last thing Palpatine would do is stir up Kenobi. He's more than content to let Kenobi and Yoda die in obscurity. You know, which is what his plan was. And technically, that's exactly what Yoda did. He died in obscurity. He managed to train Luke for 2 months, maybe. But that's it. Any other flaws? See, part of me wants to call the size of the remaining fleet of the Rebels a flaw. But Rogue One cleared that up as the fact that Vader pretty much took out Vader and the Scarif defenses, neutered the Rebel fleet. Because I'm thinking they should have had what they should have done is they should have had the Y-wings go in first with the X-wings behind them for cover. Because why wouldn't they send TIEs in the trenches? Willow, stop. Get down. Get down. Get off the chair. But yeah, other than that, that's my main real flaw with Episode 4. Episode 5, the funny thing is, I don't like Empire. I'm in that rare minority where I don't like Empire. And I think it sums up with the fact that I don't like the Rebellion era, because it occurred to me during one of my rants that I hate Episode 5 for the same reasons I love Episode 3. So there really is no tangible reason why I don't like 5 as much. I think it has to do with the fact that there's no space battle. I really think that's it. Episode 5, there were some issues there. Luke's training. That movie should have, for one thing, it should have established how long Luke was on Dagobah. Because like I said, he couldn't have been there longer than 2 months, and I would say at most a month. Because the Falcon wasn't running on fumes when they got to Cloud City, which they would have been at the end of 2 months. Realistically, he was probably there a week. But they should have established how long he was there to give you a thing, because really, there's no reason for Luke to have gained so much Force knowledge in the little time he was there. To the point where, because it was established, he did not go back to Yoda until Return of the Jedi, and yet suddenly he's a Jedi Knight at the start of that movie, or rather at the end of it. But we'll get into that when we get to that. Let's see, flaws. 3PO. 3PO is always a flaw. But no, seriously, the lack of, like I said, the lack of time scaling, the fact that they don't tell you what time it is, the fact that it's like, oh, you know, it'll take us a week to limp to Cloud City or to limp to Bespin, you know. Even that would have helped a lot. The fact that Boba Fett didn't do shit the whole movie, except, you know, get there ahead of Han, to send Vader ahead of Han, to set that whole shit up. They could have done a better job of establishing, again, I know this because I read the books, move Winky, that Vader was just torturing Han to call out Luke. Now, knowing this, you can watch the movie and deduce this, but a lot of people don't realize that that's what was going on. Yeah, that pretty much does it. Yeah, it just, I don't know why I don't like 5, because especially there where I'm struggling to come up with things wrong with it. I just don't know. It's just a thing. I guess it's just innate in me. Now let's talk Return of the Jedi. A lot of problems with Return of the Jedi. The fact that, again, with no extra training, suddenly Luke is so serene. Now granted, Return of the Jedi takes place within 6 months, I think, of Empire. So he's had time. He could have gone back to Yoda. He didn't. But if he had, that would have explained so much, like why suddenly he's so serene, and he's so powerful, and he's in control of pretty much everything he does. The fact that they established that he never finished his training really hurts that. More setup should have been given into how everyone got into position. Granted, again, it's not canon anymore, but Shadows of the Empire actually clears all that up, about how Lando got in ahead of time, how Leia got her bounty hunter costume, why Chewie was a prisoner, you know, what Luke was doing when he made his lightsaber. Not what he was doing when he made it, but when he made it, you know, after what he was doing. How he knew how to make the lightsaber, although the new canon is that he got one in Heir to the Jedi and basically disassembled it to learn how it worked. And he used that to practice assembling and disassembling it, that kind of thing. Fun fact, Luke has a purple lightsaber crystal in the new canon. He just used his green one. because that second lightsaber I mentioned had a purple blade. So that just fun fact for you. Let's see. Because there were a lot of other flaws. The various ships could have been given more screen time. Because I did not, for years, know what an A-Wing or a B-Wing were. I could spot them now, but when I was a kid, their scenes just seemed to go by so fast that I missed them. I think more attention should have been given to the actual space battle. I think more stuff could have been done to explain how the Ewoks were working. Because here's the thing in the book. Beware the Power of the Dark Side, the new canon book. It's actually described why only 2 Ewoks went with them, because the other Ewoks, almost the entire village, were off getting the rest of the Ewoks in the region to come in. That's why, at the very end, they all appeared. That's something that would have been, a throwaway line. Oh, I wish we had more of these little guys with us. Yeah, but they have to go off and get the others. That would have been a nice line to have in there. One thing I'm glad they left out was the fact that the Ewoks, in fact, did eat the Stormtroopers. That was brought up numerous times in the book that the Ewoks are planning to eat them. Because that if you look on TV tropes, that's a fridge horror thing. Oh, what did they do with those Stormtroopers? They ate them. It's no longer just implied. They fucking ate them. They cooked them up and ate them. I just hope no one else had that stew. Here's a flaw for you. Chewbacca. Chewbacca falling into that trap. Because Chewbacca is a very intelligent character. He's very smart. He's not like a genius, but he's at least as smart as Han, Luke, Leia, and all that. He's very mechanically inclined. I would argue he's a mechanical genius. He keeps the Falcon flying, doesn't he? Most of the time. And yet, a piece of meat on a string is enough to make him fall into a trap. No, I'm sorry, that's fucking stupid. That's bullshit. Oh, he's like an animal. No, he's not. He looks like an animal, but he's a sentient being. I wouldn't fall for that shit. You're out in the woods. Oh, look, here's a piece of meat left on a string. Surely this is just a meat treat. No, that's a fucking trap, Chewie. I mean, best case scenario, he thought, oh, someone must be drying this meat. In which case he'd think, oh, someone's going to come back for this meat. So that was stupid. Hi, Willow. Missed opportunity, and I do agree with why. I know exactly why. Missed opportunity, we could have had a Luke Skywalker, Darth Sidious lightsaber fight. I mean, first off, Darth Sidious as a concept didn't exist in that movie. Second off, it was pretty much established that Jedi Masters and such didn't really use lightsabers. Thirdly, they didn't have the tech to make it a good fight. I'm sorry, if you think any of the original trilogy lightsaber fights hold up to the prequel ones, you're wrong. They didn't have the wire work, they didn't have the CGI, they didn't have the shit that makes that really good. But I think, and people get pissy about this, if they ever release another special edition, I think that's a scene that needs to be added. It's just the two of them fighting and then lightning. Although the lightning thing works on its own, I guess. It's just, I like watching Palpatine fight, okay? Oh, wait, let's backtrack to episode 4. The fight between Kenobi and Vader, that's a bad scene. That's something the special edition should have fixed. It's two arthritic old men playing kendo sticks with each other. That's not a fight. That's just boop. It's a couple boops is what it is. So yeah, there's flaws with all the movies. There really are. Granted, I had to dig for some of them, but they do exist. Matter of fact, I actually found about as many flaws in episode 3 as I did in episode 5. So, make of that what you will. But, again, if you read the books, if you play the video games, if you watch the TV shows, most of the problems you think are problems aren't. It's just shit that you don't know. And the sad fact of the matter is there are people who think Star Wars is just a series of 9 movies. It's actually more than that. Fun fact, there are 2 other Star Wars movies that just aren't labeled that. The 2 Ewok movies. Though to be fair, I didn't realize they were Star Wars until like 10 years after I saw Ewoks: A Battle for Endor, which was the first of the 2 I saw, as opposed to An Ewok Adventure, which was the first one, which I saw years later. Tell you one thing, my habit of accidentally watching series in reverse really sucks, because I saw Ewoks: Battle for Endor, and then I watched An Ewok Adventure. I'm watching all the trouble that Sindel and her brother going through to rescue their parents. I'm like, you're all going to die within the first 5 minutes of the next movie. You know? Very hard to get attached to characters that you know are going to die within minutes. But there you have it. I need to watch those again, actually. But, like I said, people... There's so much to Star Wars that you just... If you watch the movies, you're missing it. I described it as picking up a book, reading the first chapter, and thinking you know how the whole franchise works. Like, oh, I'm going to read chapter 1 of Interview with a Vampire. Ha! I know how that ended! Toss the book away. No, you don't. You really don't. You missed a lot of shit. I promise you. I'm going to... oh, look, Lord of the Rings. Let's read the first chapter of Fellowship, the first chapter of Return of the King, first chapter of Two Towers. I know how these end. No, you don't. There's shit you're missing. You know? Especially in that example. Shit, I don't think you actually learn anything about Lord of the Rings until, like, the 5th chapter of that book. I think it's just recaps of The Hobbit. You know? But, it's just, yeah, you don't... If you just read, or if you just watch the movies, you don't know shit. You can get a lot more if you read the books, but you're still missing a lot. Like, unless you read the book of the movie, you won't know much about the Death Star except in passing. You're not going to know shit about Darth Vader because most of the Rebellion books took place after Endor. So Vader's mentioned in passing. Same thing with the Emperor. There's a lot you'll miss if you just read the comics, because most of the comics, I think, took place well after Endor. Same thing with the video games. Unless you do the video games based on the movie, you're missing a lot of shit. Like, if your first exposure to Star Wars is The Force Unleashed, oh boy, you're missing a lot. You know, you're not going to know what the fuck's going on. And that's the problem with Star Wars, is Star Wars is unusual in that most franchises don't work this way. Star Trek, the books, you can watch Star Trek, you know, the episodes, the movies, all the series, never touch the books and not miss a thing. With the exception of some stuff in Deep Space Nine, you can skip all of the movies and not miss much. You can go from the last episode of Kirk to the first episode of Picard and just have an understanding that in the 50 to 80 years between the two, the Klingons and the Federation made peace. You don't need to see the Undiscovered Country to know that. And really, if you think about it, out of the Kirk era movies, shit, out of any of the movies, only 2 of them are really valid. The Undiscovered Country, which talks about the Klingon Federation Peace Treaty, and Generations, which shows the fact that the Enterprise D was blown up. You could literally skip every other movie and just watch the shows and be fine. Your knowledge intact. Because they don't talk about V'ger, they don't talk about Khan coming back. They don't talk about Spock dying. Well, they mention it, I think, once. They don't talk about the thing with the whales. They don't talk about Kirk fighting God. They don't mention... I think the Sona are mentioned once, casually, in passing. They don't really talk about the Borg coming back to the Federation. And Nemesis takes place after all of the series are over. You know? So it isn't mentioned at all. You can't really do that with Star Wars. You know, Star Wars is a conglomerate of different medias. There's stuff like, again, A lot of this is before the old canon was erased. Like the Force Unleashed explained how the Rebel Alliance formed. Um, the books like Rise of Darth Vader and Labyrinth of Evil explained how that shit happened. The Clone Wars books filled in a lot of stuff before the cartoon existed. The comics, that used to be the only way you could get Dark Empire, but there's a audio drama which is pretty cool. Dark Empire, by the way, is when Luke becomes a Jedi Master, which was something you won't find out just reading the books or watching the movie. Or playing the video games. It's just suddenly Luke's a Jedi Master. When did that happen? That happened when he fell to the dark side. By the way, did you know that Luke fell to the dark side at one point? Yeah, turns out Palpatine liked to clone himself and put his spirit in his clone bodies, and he came back young and had a lightsaber battle where he utterly devastated Luke and took Luke as his new apprentice, and Leia managed to shake him out of that, and Luke took all of Emperor Palpatine's holocrons and gained so much knowledge that he became a real Jedi Master, and that's when he opened his academy. And if you didn't read the comics, you wouldn't know a fucking word of that. So you can't even just read the books, because there's shit you're missing, you know? Likewise, you can't just play the video games, because there's shit you're missing. You can't just watch the movies, because there's shit you're missing. You can't just watch the cartoons, because there's shit you're missing. That's the problem with Star Wars, is so many Star Wars quote-unquote fans don't immerse themselves in the mythology. And if you don't do that, you're missing a lot. Like, for you people who watch the original trilogy and only like the original trilogy, pick one of those movies and imagine you never saw it. Like, oh, I didn't like Return of the Jedi. Okay, let's pretend you never saw that. To you, Star Wars ends with Luke getting his hand cut off and Han Solo being frozen in carbonite. Not a great ending, is it? You're probably going to spend the rest of your life, if you never watched Jedi, wondering what the hell happened. Or let's say that you watch the other movies and you go from Empire Strikes Back to Force Awakens. Like, what? Huh? Why is Han free? What happened? You know, you'd spend your whole life wondering what the fuck happened. Or if you skipped Empire Strikes Back, you'd wonder why Luke's lightsaber was green, why Han was frozen on Jabba's wall. If you skipped Episode 4, you'd wonder who the fuck any of these people were, except Lando. You know who Lando is. But who's Han? Who's Chewie? Who's Leia? Who's Luke? Who are these fucking robots? You know, who's this big guy in the black armor? You wouldn't know any of this. And you wouldn't do that, because you're like, oh, this is Episode 4 out of 8. I better watch the other 7 episodes or I'm not going to know what's going on. Well, the books don't tell you that. The movies don't say, oh, the adventures of Luke Skywalker and his friends will be continued in Truce at Bakura, for Episode 6. Or Splinter of the Mind's Eye for Episode 4. Which, by the way, I did read that book. That was originally going to be Episode 5. And then they changed everything. Which is for the better, because Splinter of the Mind's Eye, while a good book, no Han Solo, no Chewie, not a lot of Vader. It was basically the adventures of Luke, Leia, and R2. And while that's fine for a book, it would not have went over well as a movie. There's a very good reason that script, because it was a script, was rejected. It was a fine story. Would have made a great episode, but not so much a movie. And the point I'm trying to make, and I've said it several times, is you really have to look at Star Wars as a whole, or else you're going to miss shit. Part of the reason that I like the prequels so much is because it fixes shit that the books had, And even if you just watch the movies, the idea of the Clone Wars, like, my father didn't fight in the Clone Wars, he was a navigator on a spice freighter. What's this Clone Wars he's talking about? That sounds really interesting. Turns out it was. It didn't go the way anyone thought it went. Everyone, for the longest time, thought that the clones were the bad guys. Which, in a sense, they kind of were. But not in the sense that everyone thought. The Clone Wars also explains the question of why battle droids aren't a thing. Like, why don't you just arm droids? Because the galaxy still has a case of PTSD from the last time people armed droids. Because you can get droids to do fucking anything. Droids won't think twice about blowing your fucking brains out. They won't have a twinge of conscience. You know? And, it also explains where the prejudice against droids came from. Like, we don't serve their kind here. Chances are Wooher, I don't know if I said that name right, but that's the guy who ran the cantina. Chances are he has some Clone Wars flashbacks about when droids tried to kill everyone. You know, maybe he didn't always live on Tatooine. Maybe he came from one of the core worlds that was hit by the clones and the droids. You know, where a Clone Wars battle was fought. Who knows? It's just there's a whole lot of holes in the canon. And that's where the books came in. And really, I congratulate them on making the books a thing, because it used to be, when you read a novel, it was a fan fiction. You know? When you read Reunion from Star Trek, that's fan fiction. None of that shit is real as far as the Star Trek canon goes. Like, the names of Picard's crew on the Stargazer, which is what that book's about, are canon, I guess, but you'll never find that referenced in an episode, or a movie, or even other books for the most part. But when you read Truce at Bakura, shit like that's referenced. When you read Heir to the Empire, that book has so many long-lasting implications on the canon. That's the book where Thrawn was introduced. That's the book where Talon Karrde was introduced. That's the book where Mara Jade, Luke Skywalker's wife, was introduced. And the canon forever became a thing. Hell, that book has leaked in to the real canon. Thrawn is in Rebels. He was brought... I have the book Thrawn, which is the prequel to Rebels, one of the prequels to Rebels, in my drawer right now. Signed by Timothy Zahn, by the way. That was an awesome day. Got to meet the author, got to chit-chat with him, get his signature. It was great. Also won a Star Trek tournament that day and got some free cookies, but that's another story. But if you limit yourself to one of the media, you're missing out on everything else. Like, if you're a sports fan and you only watch when your team plays home games, you're not gonna know. You're gonna miss a lot of shit. Like, using my local team, like, I only watch the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they play in Tampa Bay. Well, if they go to the Super Bowl, unless it's held here, I'm missing it. Surely that won't matter. It's the same thing with Star Wars. If you don't read the books, if you don't play the games, if you don't read the comics, if you don't watch the cartoons, and if you don't watch the movies, you're missing out. You have to do, to a degree, all of those things. Like me, for example, I don't read the comics. Not because I don't like them, but because I don't have access to them. So I'm missing out on a lot of the old lore. The only reason I ever found out about Dark Empire, besides having one issue of it, I think it was like issue 4 or something, is because back in the old LimeWire Kazaa days, I found the audio drama. And it was pretty damn cool. And, yeah, like I said, there's just a lot of shit that you have to... Willow, I'm gonna beat your ass if you don't quit hopping up here. My squirt bottle. You're gonna get hosed next time you jump up here. I swear to God, I've moved that cat 12 times. But a lot of the problems people have with Star Wars are either nostalgia goggles, where, the original trilogy was perfect. No, it's kind of shitty. It looked like butt. Some of the puppets were garbage. Speaking of puppets, everyone's like, Yoda's a puppet again in Episode 8. That's great. No, he looks horrible. He looks like crap. That is the worst appearance Yoda has ever had in the fucking 6 movies he's appeared in. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8. Yeah. Well, 7 movies. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8. 7 movies. In the 7 movies he's appeared in, he has never looked worse than in this movie. They should have CGI'd him or at least got a better puppet. You can tell he's a puppet. He looks fake as shit. And people are like, oh, CGI is garbage. No, it's not. Did you like The Hobbit? Then CGI isn't garbage, because that whole fucking movie was CGI. I do not understand this mindset where older is better. Because I grew up watching stop motion, okay? When I was a kid, I loved dinosaur movies. Anything with dinosaurs, I would watch. And my grandmother would, back in the old TV dial and TV guide days, would look through and find every movie she could find with dinosaurs in it. So I used to watch a lot of the old B and C movies, like Planet of Dinosaurs and Dinosaurus, which is a name. The Last Dinosaur. Fucking Valley of Gwangi. All those movies. I watched those growing up. Hell, I've watched some of them recently because I downloaded them. Because they were part of my past. I fucking found DVDs of some of them. And these are the old stop motion days, and they look like butt. I was a kid and thought they looked like butt. But that's just how they were. And then CGI came out with Jurassic Park, and I'm looking at this, I'm like, wow, that's good. And people think, oh, all CGI is bad. No, watch Sci-Fi Channel movies and you'll see bad CGI. Because there's a difference between CGI and bad CGI. And most of what people say is bad CGI isn't. Like, oh, I could tell it's fake. Well, I have seen maybe one stop motion movie where you couldn't tell it was fake. And even then you could tell it was fake, and that was Valley of Gwangi. That's some of the best stop motion I've ever seen. And you could still tell that those dinosaurs and that elephant were added after the fact. And you can tell that they're fucking clay puppets. So, don't act like that's any better. I mean, granted, animatronics. You want to do animatronics, that's fine. Animatronics are much better than, say, stop motion. But I don't always think they're as good as CGI. And you can be mad about ships not being shot by miniature. I don't care. But you can do more faster with CGI. Like, you don't need to make as many miniatures for CGI. And, like, my friend is an anti-CGI person. He's like, oh, they should have had extras for all those droids. I'm like, no. That would be horrible. You could have... Do you know how much that would have eaten into the budget to pay all those extras? Even if you're only giving them $20 in a sandwich, the sheer numbers they had wouldn't have worked. I actually think they could have used a bit more of the prequel mindset to make the newest trilogy work better. The idea, when I say prequel mindset, I'm talking the idea of thousands of people fighting thousands of people. Because you didn't have that. That's something, the space battle in episode 7 was just a couple of starfighters. Like, first it was one starfighter, then it was the Falcon with a couple TIEs, then it was some X-Wings versus some TIEs. And I actually agree with the complaint I heard about episode 8. Episode 8 should have been one long space battle, just a war of attrition as they're trying to get away, just fighting off TIEs. But it wasn't. And at no point was there ground battles. I think that in episode 7 and 8, if you had one scene, especially in episode 8, as they're fleeing... God, I don't even remember what the planet's called. But as they're fleeing the world that they're stationed on, if you had fucking 700 stormtroopers fighting against like 300 rebels as they're trying to get people aboard the transports, I think that would have been a long, long way to fixing that movie. And then in space, rather than, oh, let's take 3 X-Wings and 6 of those bombers and try and take out this one ship, if you had squadrons and fighters, trying to pull this shit off. Because the rebels had three big cruisers at that point and like no starfighters. That sucked. It was garbage. And I think a little bit of the prequel mindset of vast armies clashing would have really helped that. Now, you might think otherwise, but if you think otherwise, then you have to tell me that the Battle of Endor wasn't a good fight because of all the ships in it. I'm sorry, a space battle should be at least slightly chaotic. What else? I think I've exhausted my talking points. Anyway, I just don't know. I just like to talk about Star Wars. And if you want to bitch about the movies, that's fine. There are things to bitch about in all of the movies. I actually didn't cover Rogue One like I thought I was going to, but yeah. Um, but yeah, if any of you feel like talking Star Wars with me, I'll talk Star Wars. I'll fucking voice chat Star Wars, whatever. You want to debate me? We can debate. You want to argue in the comments? We can argue in the comments. Just give me something better than, oh, the prequels were all crap. No, they weren't. Even people who hate the prequels can find shit they like. Look me in the eye and tell me that Duel of the Fates is a shitty song. Look me in the eye and tell me that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan versus Darth Maul wasn't an awesome moment. You know? Look me in the eye and tell me that Obi-Wan versus Anakin on Mustafar wasn't a great lightsaber fight. I think it would have been better if one of them wasn't using a blue lightsaber. I don't care what the color was, but two blue lightsabers just whirring around kind of kills it for me. I mean, give Anakin his red lightsaber, give Obi-Wan a green lightsaber that he picked up from, Kit Fisto or something. I don't know. But that was a great fight. Both of the Yoda lightsaber fights were great fights. The Dooku fights were great fights. The worst lightsaber fight of the prequels beats the best one of the originals. I'm sorry, it just does. Because they had better choreography, they had wire work, they had CGI, all sorts of fun shit like that. And if you're gonna look me in the eye and tell me with a straight face that the fight between Obi-Wan and Vader on the Death Star was a good fight, for any reason other than, oh, it was just the two of them airing old grievances, like, oh, that was a fantastic fight, then you have severe nostalgia goggles on. Because that fight was not it wasn't engrossing, it wasn't exciting, it was two old men taking turns whacking at each other. I've had better lightsaber fights as a child. I've had better fake sword fights as a child than that. And you mean to tell me these are master duelists? I just don't get that from them. That's one of those scenes where, again, if they make another special edition, and I'm not saying they should, but if they do, they need to get Ewan McGregor in there. Make him look old Obi-Wan-ish. And I'm not for dubbing Ewan McGregor over Alec Guinness. But Alec Guinness is dead, and even if he wasn't, he's so old he couldn't possibly do the scene now. But I'm saying if they ever did that, do some kind of mocap thing so that Vader and Obi-Wan can have a real fight. A real fight that literally would stop the crowd. Because the stormtroopers don't have a reason to turn around. Oh, our boss is swinging his stick at some old guy. No. Give me a fucking prequel fight where the two of them are just tearing into each other. And then have it at the end where Obi-Wan puts his saber up and lets Vader hit him and vanishes. That's a mystery. What happened to Obi-Wan's lightsaber? Because I promise you Vader took it. I mean, was it destroyed with the Death Star? Did Vader put it in with his shit? Because, keep in mind, this happened in orbit of Alderaan. There's nothing to say he didn't transfer this shit to the Devastator. Or another Star Destroyer or whatever. So, alright, we're going to end it here. Again, you want to talk Star Wars? I'm game to talk Star Wars. But bye, everybody.